Hi everyone, welcome to Mrs. Moskowitz's Art Room. Today I'd like to introduce you to an artist who loved painting fruit, and his name is Paul Cezanne. Paul Cezanne was born in France, and as a child he loved to swim and do a lot of normal things like normal kids do. He wrote poetry, he liked to play the cornet, which is a musical instrument, and he roamed the French countryside with his best friend, Émile Zola. Émile Zola turned out later in life that he became a very, very famous writer, and Paul Cezanne became a very famous painter. But Paul Cezanne was very meticulous, meaning he wanted everything to be perfect. If he was painting an apple, he wanted to have a perfect shape of an apple, and he spent hours upon hours perfecting his technique. He started off doing portraits, and Baruch Hashem, his wife was a very patient person, and she would sit for him. This is a self-portrait that he did. Okay. He was considered an impressionist artist because that doesn't look like a real person, but you can see, when you zoom in close, you just see blocks of color. But when you pull away, you can see how it zooms in to be a person, and that is his self-portrait. Because he took so long to paint, people wouldn't sit for him. So he started painting still lifes. A still life is a painting of something that doesn't move. Okay. So fruit, flowers, anything like that that does not move would be considered a still life. And I brought a couple of examples to show you. This is a still life, and it's basically a collection of things that you put together that go somewhat together. This one, what ties it all together is it's primarily secondary colors. It's got orange and purples and greens, which are all secondary colors. This one is oranges and pomegranates. And what ties this one together is the silver or pewter color that comes all the way through. And this is, you have your complementary colors. You have your blue in the background with the bright oranges around it. This still life here is done mostly in your warm colors. You have your reds, your yellows, and your oranges, and it's tied together with the complementary color of red, which is green. So when you're setting up a still life, you want to try to have something that ties it all together. And Cezanne would use a lot of the same things in his still lifes all the time. Because he was so slow in painting, a lot of his fruit would become rotten by the end of his still life. So I'd like to show you some pictures by Cezanne. This is one of his still lifes. And this is predominantly in your cool colors. You have your greens, your blues, and your purples, and then the yellows and the reds to pop out from the apple and the pear. So he went through some stages. His first stage was doing portraits because that's what everyone was doing back then. And then he did still lifes. And then he started doing landscapes. And he would like to blend his colors together. And yet some of them just really stand out in the different shapes that are in there. And if you look very closely at this, it's just shapes built up of colors to make your landscape. And he was considered an impressionist artist. His father, as usual with most of these artists back then, did not want him to be an artist. His father wanted him to be a lawyer or a banker. He wanted him to do something that would bring in money, whereas being an artist is not guaranteed that you can make a living from that. When he was 23 years old, he moved to Paris, and that's when he really started developing his skills. he didn't want to be around a lot of other people because his style was so unique, which is why we study him today, that the other people he wasn't accepted into the salon, and he was not accepted by a lot of the other artists. He was more of a loner. So what I want you to do before we do our project video, I want you to look at different fruits and see the different shapes. See how it's fatter at the top and comes down skinnier at the bottom. It's not a flat image, it's rounded. Okay? Sometimes you would be able to look at an apple that way, which looks very, very different than looking at it straight up. And look at the bottom of it. It has bumps on it. So really look at some of the fruits that you have at home. This painting was done by my painting teacher. His name is David Butler. And it's a painting just of an apple. But look at all the colors that are involved in this. You have your yellows going into your purples, which are complementary colors. And then in the red, you have a lot of the green, which makes the red pop out. Cezanne did a lot of his paintings using a palette knife. And a palette knife is a knife that you use to paint with instead of a paintbrush. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. And it's a lot of fun to paint with something different rather than just a paintbrush. And you can make a paintbrush out of anything, which we'll discuss in our next video. So I hope you enjoyed learning about Paul Cezanne. I hope I'll see you back here so you can see how to make a project in his style. In the meantime, have a great day. Thanks for visiting me at Mrs. Moskowitz's studio.